Hi guys. Before we proceed to this video, we've got something very important to share with you. Neoliberalism, Inequality and Authoritarianism by Professor John V. Kofis is available for purchase. You can order it directly from the publisher Little French eBooks or through Amazon.
Hello everyone, welcome to an introductory or a teaser session on President Donald Trump's endeavors to introduce a new world order, something that the United States population and the world entirely, the entire world, became familiar with in 1991 when George Herbert Walker Bush uh, promulgated this concept of a new world order, obviously referring to a post Cold War order. The initial world order was one that was announced by Truman, President Harry Truman, in 1947 when he he introduced the Truman Doctrine, which was a policy of containment of the Soviet bloc and consolidation of U.S. hegemony in the capitalist world economy. The following year, of course, the United States introduced the Marshall Plan. The United States had already set in place the Bretton Woods system that had created the IMF and the World Bank. Now, in the 1940s, the fact is that the United States had the power as the world's number one economic power, given that most of the rest of the world was shattered because of World War II. It was also the country that could peg the dollar to gold and guarantee that the dollar was as good as gold. It was a time when the United States alone had nuclear weapons. So geoeconomically and geopolitically, the United States could in fact mold a world order. The fact is that the so-called world order of the Cold War that the United States molded, it shaped, to serve, of course, American interests above all, including the Marshall Plan. A lot of people realize, of course, that the Marshall Plan was an aid program, and there was something very similar on a different scale, by the way, in the Pacific, namely for Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, all intended to buttress those economies, make them viable trading partners for the United States, allowing them to realize its trade surplus with the United States. Please keep this in mind, given the Trump tariffs against those countries today. All that was done in order to have those countries as frontline states, as states that would counterbalance the Soviet bloc as well as communist China after Mao Zedong and Zhou Enlai in 1949 prevailed over the forces of the US-backed nationalist forces of Chiang Kai-shek, who retreated to the island of Taiwan. And of course, Taiwan became a country that was supported by the United States for geopolitical reasons. So geoeconomic and geopolitical reasons combined allowed the United States during the Cold War to form a world order. Now, all of that, of course, came to an end with the end of the Soviet bloc in 1991, as Bush, the elder, announced in 91. And coincidentally, the rise of China and its integration into the world economy by the early 90s. And of course, with China becoming fully integrated into the capitalist world economy since then. The United States, it may seem, and certainly in the last few weeks, the European press, but global press, has argued that Donald Trump is now trying to undo the new world order of Bush and to forge another new world or yet another new world order. It may seem that way on the surface, except that if one examines more closely what the Trump administration is doing, it is really based on the foundations that were established um, already toward the end of the Obama administration. Then Trump, in his first term, when he became tried to become isolationist, he wasn't full-fledged isolationist in the manner that the United States was during the 1920s until FDR was elected in 1932. Certainly not that way, but certainly pulled out of the Paris Climate Treaty, pulled out of the Iran nuclear deal, um, began demanding that Europe pay more for its own defense, raise the percentage of its defense budget and buy American weapons, that it rely more on American energy and more on American trade. So there was a great deal of that. And clearly, China, in the first Trump term, was um, the main focus of the Trump administration's endeavors to um, create a new world order. And the Biden administration, by the way, although it was multilateral, it was still militaristic. It kept the old Cold War military Keynesianism doctrine that is spend what it doesn't have actually borrow to spend on defense, considering the U.S. defense industry, the U.S. defense sector absorbs currently close to $1 trillion, more than the next 10 countries combined, by the way. And Biden achieved something that the previous administrations had not. It encouraged Ukraine to go to war against Russia instead of seeking a diplomatic solution. This is not to say that Ukraine started the war. On the contrary, Ukraine simply wanted to be fully integrated into the European Union and to become a NATO member. And NATO had expansionist uh, designs, and it wanted to go through the Black Sea, the Transcaucasus region into Central Asia. So that all of that was upsetting to the national security interests of Russia. So ultimately the U.S. wanted the cutting off of Western European and Eastern European energy dependence on Russia, and certainly the Nord Stream pipeline um, cut off, sabotage, was part of that. And the U.S., of course, began to sell more energy to the Europeans. Now, so the foundations, if you will, this is where I disagree with analysts today about Trump trying to create a new world order, yet another new world order. The foundations really were set before before President Donald Trump was inaugurated on 20th January 2025. The foundations were laid from about 2014 onward all the way to today. And he today simply Donald Trump has gone that extra um, mile to lash out at friend and foe alike with the universal tariff regime. Of course, um, going back and forth with that, unleashing massive tariffs, then retreating, taking a pause, cutting the percentage of the tariffs. except for China, because really China is the major competitor. Now, the question, of course, is, as I analyze in the longer video, can the United States, can any country simply wish to mold, to forge a world order, a new world order? For example, what would the world, how would the world react if the Philippines made such an announcement that they want to forge a new world order? No one would take it seriously. What if France announced it? Well, if France has made such an announcement, okay, and it was within the context of a European Union-wide um, coordinated policy, perhaps some people, not some people, a lot of people would take notice. Although the fact is, France and the European Union do not have the muscle, the economic, the political, the military muscle, to forge a new world order. World orders are not like genies. You rub them and there appears a new world order. Trump can't wish that to come into being for a very simple reason. The United States in 2025 does not have the power that it had during the Truman administration in the 1940s. It simply does not have that power. It is now in a world where there are a number of countries, friends and foes, that have nuclear weapons. They can easily challenge the United States at that level, and God forbid we go that level. We go that route. Sorry. The other thing is, of course, the economic power of the United States has gradually declined. This is the new world order is about a crisis, a twofold crisis: the crisis of the neoliberal political economy on a world scale, as the 2008 Great Recession illustrated. It proved that the neoliberal model has been in crisis since the 1990s, by the way, with the dot-com bubble, the internet bubble, and then the Great Recession of 2008, and it continues. The United States' inability to function within a neoliberal model world order where China has benefited, okay? And the Japanese government for a number of years now has been saying exactly that. China has benefited. Um, not the G7, certainly not the United States. So now we see a shift in the core of the world economy from the United States to China. And no matter the noise that one hears about China being in a weaker position and having less leverage, and it will come begging the United States, because the United States really has um, two elements that it can use as leverage. One, it does have the largest defense spending in the world, and it has military bases almost in every country. But from 195 countries, about 170 have some kind of a U.S., not military bases, but some kind of a U.S. military presence. And then the other lever that the U.S. has that it can pull, and it keeps mentioning it, and it's the Trump administration officials keep mentioning, hoping the Chinese would come begging for a deal with Trump, but they'll be waiting for a long time for that. Um, the other leverage, it has a consumer-based economy, and so they're saying, well, you want our markets, you have to adjust your tariffs. This is not to say, by the way, that China has not benefited in the last 3 decades by realizing not only a trade surplus with regard to the United States, but the entire world. Actually, China is a net beneficiary of the neoliberal world economy, although it has a system of a mixed economy with a strong state structure, and the state having the last word on economic planning, on development, on social development, economic development, obviously on a world scale through the Belt and Road Initiative program that China has. Now, can China forge a new world order. Well, it has certainly hinted at that with its BRICS group, that it is in a position, more so than the United States, to do just that. I invite you to join me for a lengthy analysis of this topic, and I ask you to write comments, ask questions, whatever you like, and to please join this channel, and become members, subscribe to it. Thank you very much. Thank you.